Bill Jensen sat alone in his living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm shadows across the walls. He flipped through the pages of a magazine, his mind drifting aimlessly as he tried to relax after a long day at work. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, sharp and jarring. It was a faint rattling, distant yet unmistakable. It sounded like a rattlesnake. Bill's brow furrowed as he glanced around, cautiously searching for the source of the sound. His heart was beginning to race, and he took a tentative step forward. That's when he realized the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, filling the room. Testing himself, he placed his hands over his ears, and to his surprise, it only made the sound easier to hear. This rattling wasn't coming from within the room. It was coming from inside his head. After a few minutes, it finally subsided, and Bill resolved that he should consider having his hearing checked. He knew he probably wouldn't, but he would at least think about it. In the days to come, however, the rattling persisted, occurring at random intervals and seemingly without cause, leading Bill to become increasingly concerned. Seeking reassurance, he confided in his sister Julie, who visited him one afternoon. Over cups of tea, Bill recounted the unsettling experiences, describing how the rattling seemed to follow him, haunting his every move. Julie, ever attuned to the supernatural, suggested that if the sound proved to have no rational explanation, it might be a portent of something sinister, a warning of danger yet to come. Bill scoffed at her notions, as he always had, and yet as they spoke, memories of their childhood came to mind. They had grown up hearing tales of strange occurrences and unexplainable phenomena within their family, and Julie herself believed she had experienced such events, fleeting moments of intuition and insight. And now, as Bill described his own encounters with the mysterious rattling, Julie couldn't help but wonder if it was all true. Before leaving, she gave her brother a hug, urging him to be careful. Bill had always been a practical man, unbothered by superstition or fear. But despite his skepticism, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that accompanied the rattling. One Saturday afternoon, determined to put his mind at ease, he offered to clean out his aging parents' old shed which stood in their backyard, hoping that the task would distract him from his situation. As he rummaged through the clutter, he stumbled upon a box of childhood toys, belonging to him and Julie. With each one he lifted and examined, memories flooded back. His hand brushed over an old dusty baseball, and he immediately recalled the last time he had played with it. That day, a neighborhood friend had hit the ball, driving it deep into the woods beyond the backyard, and young Bill had happily bounded after it. Upon finding it, he had been startled by a loud rattling mere feet from where he stood. Even for a child, the sound was unmistakable, and he knew he was dangerously close to a rattlesnake. Oddly enough, this was where his memory of that event ended, having no recollection of how he had escaped the snake unharmed. Not wishing to linger on it, he decided to call up Julie to tell her about the box of toys, certain she'd get a kick out of it, but he quickly realized he had left his cell phone inside his parents' house. Taking a step back toward the center of the room, he was struck with a sudden dizziness, followed by the disembodied rattling sound which had been plaguing him in recent days. He closed his eyes, shaking his head, trying to will away the sound, but it grew louder, echoing in his ears with a menacing intensity. Bill's heart raced, his breath quickened, and for a moment, panic threatened to consume him. At that point, all he wanted was to escape from the suffocating confines of the shed, out into the open air of the backyard. He opened his eyes, turning toward the door of the shed, and then froze in his tracks. To his horror, he found that the rattling this time was not in his head. There, coiled in the doorway, was the source of the sound, a rattlesnake, scales glinting in the sunlight. Its tail stood upright, vibrating fiercely. Bill's mind raced as he frantically scanned the shed for any means of escape. He didn't have his phone, and he knew there was no way his parents would hear him if he called out. His eyes darted from one object to the next, searching for something he could use. With each passing moment, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. As he frantically searched for a way out, his heart raced in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. Suddenly, his foot caught on an old box, sending it toppling over, the contents spilling onto the floor. Startled by the noise, the rattlesnake coiled tighter, its tail vibrating furiously as it prepared to strike. Bill froze, his breath catching in his throat as he stared down the menacing serpent. Time seemed to slow as he watched the snake, its eyes fixed on him with deadly intent. With lightning speed, the snake lunged forward, its fangs flashing as it aimed for Bill's leg. Reacting on instinct, Bill threw himself to the side, narrowly evading the deadly strike by mere inches. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he realized just how close it had gotten. He quickly froze in place again, still precariously close to the snake. Bill knew if it struck again, there was a strong chance it would reach him. They remained that way for what felt like an eternity. Bill's eyes lifted for a fraction of a second, and he saw the handle of an old shovel near the door. In a desperate bid for survival, he reached for it, his fingers trembling with fear. But as his hand closed around the handle, the snake struck out at him again. Bill reacted with a quick jerk of his leg, narrowly avoiding the snake's bite for a second time, but he lost his balance. With a gasp of terror, he stumbled backward. In that moment of paralyzing fear, certain the snake would be on him in seconds, the dizziness Bill had felt before returned. Only this time, it was immediately followed by a strange sensation, a warmth that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep inside of himself. A peculiar calm washed over him, starting as a gentle trickle, but soon engulfing him entirely. It felt as if time slowed down, and the frantic beating of his heart steadied into a rhythmic, almost hypnotic pulse. And suddenly, Bill was 11 years old again, standing in the forest. As small as he was, the snake seemed much bigger, and yet the peace he felt remained. His eyes were closed, but he could somehow still see his surroundings, becoming more aware as his fear dissipated. He could sense the snake's uncertainty, its instinct of self-preservation, and he effortlessly reached out. Not physically, but mentally, bridging the gap between them. Through this strange bond, he felt a surge of empathy wash over him. With a deep breath, he focused on the sense of peace that had enveloped him, willing it to extend beyond himself, across the invisible barrier that separated him from the snake. He could feel the tension in the snake's body begin to ebb away, its frantic rattling gradually subsiding into a low, almost melodic hum. In that moment, he sensed the snake's fear dissipate along with his own. It was a surreal experience, one that defied explanation. To Bill's amazement, the rattling soon stopped entirely, and he opened his eyes, finding himself back in the shed. The snake had already loosened its coils and was slowly slithering out the door, disappearing around the side of the shed. Bill was overwhelmed with relief as he watched it go. It wasn't long before animal control arrived, discovering a nest of snakes near the edge of the woods and safely removing them. Bill couldn't shake the feeling of awe and wonder that lingered in the air. A fog within his mind had lifted, and he could still feel the presence of the strange force he had tapped into, as if it was now a part of him. Reflecting on both of his rattlesnake encounters, he could no longer deny the truth that lay before him. Although he had once been skeptical of such notions, he now knew that there was much more to the world than met the eye. This was hardly the last time Bill Jensen would experience the otherworldly force that had twice saved his life. But at least he never heard that rattling again.